On episode number 72 of Leaders in Healthcare, we're talking about the field of longevity. Sergey Jakimov is a Forbes 30 under 30 serial entrepreneur turned investor and the founding partner of LongeVC, a venture capital firm investing in the biotechnology space. Also a partner at LongeVC, Artem Trotsyuk is a PhD computer scientist and bioengineer lecturer at Stanford University with research interests in AI, genetics, and regenerative medicine.
We asked students who wants to live to be 100. About half of the students raised their hands.
Prolonging the healthy human performance really is key. What's the point of living a longer life if it's not the life worth living?
Brian Johnson, the millionaire biohacker, longevity researcher with the Netflix special.
Is this popularizing the field in a way? Yes. Is it attainable as a role model? No. Should you repeat it? No.
Echo Health, the Spotify founder, started a full body scanning MRI system. They've just raised another round, I think a really big, like 200 million or something.
We got to start thinking about getting our Neuralink implant, upload our sentient brain to a Amazon Web Services cloud.
Should we talk about AI then?
Where do you think the most money is to be made?
Newcomers in the field of cryonics, all sorts of tissue regeneration, all the way up to head transplants.
Should I skimp out and save a bit of money by just cryogenically freezing my head and forgetting about the rest of the body?
That we don't know.
I mean, if you want to.
All right, so what is HealthSpan and why has this been your guys' biggest focus? What's the difference there?
Artem, you want to start or I start? That depends. Are you tackling
start.
the philosophical question? Okay, I'm tackling the philosophical question. So I think the whole longevity field debate has been, I think, very much centered around kind of the health span versus lifespan debate. Right, where I mean, you can go great length in arguing which one is superior. I think for us as a VC, given that we really focus on age-related diseases, so disease-modifying treatments in age-related diseases, for us the health span part and kind of prolonging the healthy human performance really is key. And we kind of view lifespan as a byproduct of it, just as a consequence of prolonging health span. Just because, it kind of goes as what's the point of living a longer life if it's not the life worth living, right? If these are not the quality years. So for us, it's health span over lifespan, I guess, any time of the day, any day of the week. Yeah, Artem, what do you think?
I'd say they're pretty conjoined, right? You want to live longer and you want to live quality. And that's kind of how they both combine. And the debate's ongoing. The longevity community is like, well, which one is it? Is it the health span or the lifespan? The lifespan over the health span? When we get older, we don't accept that we're getting older. We still feel young, even though you talk to a 60-year-old, they're like, I don't feel 60. I feel 30. Okay, so at that point, we're like, okay, so are things hurting? What's going on? Well, XYZ is happening, but I still feel young. And so that conjoining of matching the young with the therapeutics and the development, whatever we're focusing on the investment side to help people live quality longer. So I agree with everything Sergey said. And I think that the debate is just tomato nuances and words.
Yeah, I guess like lifespan perhaps is a little bit too superficial of a metric. It really comes down to quality of life and meaningful time.
Yeah, I definitely agree. When I teach a class at Stanford, we focus on longevity sciences. We ask students who wants to live to be 100. About half of the students raised their hands. And I asked the students who didn't raise their hand, why not? They said, well, it depends what kind of quality of life I'm going to have for those 100 years. If I'm going to be living for 100 years in the same way as I was at 20 or 30 or 40, sure, I want to live to be 100. But if my last 20 years are just going to be pain, problems, health issues, I don't want to live to be 100 because that just doesn't seem like a fun time.
It's the new 90.
I think it's also going to join together with the fact that the whole longevity field has been for quite some time, I wouldn't say obsessed, but role modelizing supercentenarians, right? Essentially people that lived excessively long, right? The outliers statistically. And the reality of it is we don't know why they did so, right? So there are so many variables at play. I mean, genetics, something that they did throughout these 100 plus years of their lives. You cannot really digest it down to variables and say, this thing impacted this and this impacted that. So, and it's not an attainable role model. This is why it's not an attainable role model. And this is why, per se, simply increasing lifespan is also not I think, a viable goal. Health span is the one.
Then I guess in terms of role modeling, I wanted to ask your guys' thoughts on Brian Johnson, the millionaire biohacker, longevity researcher with the Netflix special Don't Die, and his goal of being 200 years old. Where do you stand on that mission?
Artem,
You can start
I
that
feel
one.
like you're going to be more politically correct on that one, Ghost.
Fair enough. Um, I like the fact that Brian Johnson is shining a spotlight on the longevity ecosystem and highlighting the importance of a lot of key cellular cycles, indicators, and performance metrics that we should do to consider what it's like to have quality of life, and then doing that in a quantitative way that measures the assessment of what's happening on the biological level. Now, is the layperson able to afford a system implementation like that? I don't necessarily know that everyone has a few $100,000 a month to spend on that. But I do think it's an interesting experiment for an individual to show what they can do for systemically going about longevity in a quantitative way. And the fact that even young people now are really excited about the longevity ecosystem and taking classes. This quarter, for example, we have a longevity class series that's focusing on how we age. And in that class, when we're discussing each of the systems and like skin, your gut, your brain, I have two students in that class who are computer scientists who are just started freshmen. They just started school, and they said, I'm a computer scientist, but I want to learn computer science. But this longevity thing is interesting to me. I'm curious what all this is about. I think that's a byproduct of tech bros like Brian Johnson and other folks starting to be interested in this space. What was the guy Echo Health, the Spotify founder, who now has started a full body scanning MRI system? That is now, they've just raised another round. I think a really big, like 200 million or something, if I remember reading correctly. Where now he did a full tech startup, Spotify. Many of us use it. Now he's really focused on this component around how to improve your health, how to improve your overall kind of health span and preventative care and so forth. So I think what I'm trying to get across is across all these different people, what they're focusing on is prevention is key to having a longer life, and having longevity integrated by discussing that, doing testing, doing different types of analyses, doing different potential interventions is a way for us, the common folk, I guess, to also participate in that movement.
I guess if you had to choose between prevention, diagnostics, and therapeutics, you had to go all your eggs in one basket. Would it be prevention?
That's hard because they oftentimes collide with each other. You need a good tool to assess, to be able to prevent, to be able to then do treatment. So, for example, Echo Health, it's a tool that scans your body to assess if you have any kind of moles that are forming that might be skin lesions or skin cancerous. So that way you can then go to a doctor and get that removed. And then if you have anything that is flagged as cancer, you would get treatment for that. So across the board, all three of them are intertwined. So that's a really hard question. Sergey, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, so starting from the all the eggs in one basket, I think I cannot answer. And the reason why is because it doesn't really check out with how healthcare works. Right? In order to put all eggs in one basket, you basically need to assume that you can essentially prevent everything in all potential patients, right? Or be able to essentially scan people, quote unquote, scan people for something in mass way or a society-wide way. That just doesn't work. So you will end up with cohorts of patients where you were successful at preventing something. You will end up with patients where you missed something and you actually need a disease-modifying treatment for something that has already started. So it's not really viable to even talk about this, to be completely honest. You kind of need all of it, I think, in equal parts and in equal importance. And when it comes to Brian, I mean, I had a lengthy LinkedIn post recently about this, and I admired the dedication first and foremost. Is this popularizing the field in a way? Yes. Is it attainable as a role model? No. Should you repeat it? No, you should not really, because most of the stuff that is showed in the documentary is lacks clinical data. to actually back it. B, can be outright dangerous, such as stem cells and all that. Like that is something we do not recommend doing for like an average person for sure. Don't even touch it. But then again, it depends on how you approach it. Do you approach it as an entertaining outlier, like a Truman Show type of thing? It's perfect. Do you approach it as a manual for action for an average individual looking to start on something longevity-ish in his or her lifestyle? No. Apart from diet and basic stuff like exercise, sleep, and everything, you should not really use it as a manual. That's that. Otherwise, well, kudos to Brian. I mean, he obviously does crazy stuff, and he kind of enjoys it in the process. So why not?
You could tell he loves it. He truly enjoys the process. 130 pills 3 times a day.
Yeah, isn't it great? The only issue, like philosophically, that I have is that maybe spending all your time to defeat aging kind of defeats the purpose of defeating aging in the first place. But then again, if you are enjoying it in the process, then maybe this is the life to live for you, right? But again, it's super subjective. It's super individual. You should not use it as a manual.
Are you a healthcare professional ready to take the next step in your career? Do you dream of a role where you truly make a difference in a community that's perfect for you and your family? Well then, let me introduce you to Cherry Health. Our platform puts thousands of healthcare opportunities right at your fingertips. Explore jobs by location, specialty, compensation, and more. All on an intuitive map-based platform, available on Android, iOS, or your computer's internet browser. Create your professional profile for free and get started messaging directly with employers. Beyond the app, Cherry Health also offers personalized, white-glove recruiting services who can guide you every step of the way. Your dream healthcare career is just a click or a phone call away. Visit www.cherry.health to start the next phase of your journey.
I guess, as you mentioned, sort of the scanning and the diagnostic side of things becoming more popular. Are you aware of any data or research that's saying that this is a great idea, we need to do more of this? Like here in Canada, in the health system, for example, the medical culture is very much opposed to that, right? So patient went and got a full body MRI in the United States, roll your eyes and oh, now I have to deal with all this stuff. And I don't know. Is this truly bad for you? The argument being, okay, well now you've found all these incidental omas, they call it, and now you have to follow up on this thing that's likely insignificant. The patient's going to get a biopsy, which is going to cause an infection or some other complication. Are we being medically gaslit by the system because of budgetary constraints, or is your daily MRI every morning on top of your 130 pills, is that actually in your benefit, do you think?
Artem, you want to?
So daily MRIs, please don't do those. To anyone listening, I hope you don't have the urge or need to scan yourself on the daily. And now, preventative MRIs, if you do that and you're doing tracking, of course, across time, our healthcare system, at least in the United States, is not set up for prevention. It's set up for treatment when you're sick. And so a paradigm shift to focus more on preventative care, so that way you can catch things ahead of time, is something that is super interesting, and I hope that is something that we can move to and move towards. But so if I were given the option to do a full body scan, I would personally likely do it once a year and then track over time in an annual physical to see what's going on. If there's something that they flag in the system as a small OMA, as you mentioned, and it hasn't progressed in a year, it's likely nothing. And so there's not a big concern there. But if there's something that's progressing rapidly, I'd rather do something with it earlier rather than having the risk for something that is much more expensive and costs later. So it depends in terms of kind of the individual, but every day, too much, every month, even too much, unless you have an aggressive stage cancer that you need to really track. At that point, you're already doing it with your doctor at your clinic, and you don't necessarily need to do that for biohacking or preventative purposes inherently. And so
I can also take a stab at it. I think Artem kind of laid it out very well. In my mind, there are two horizons which you can look at. The first horizon is the common sense horizon. And that is, in certain disease areas, there is a truck of data saying that in certain age-related diseases, stage one diagnostics kind of and stage one discovery of a take ovarian cancer. So in that LongeVC, we have, for example, invested in the company called AOA Diagnostics out of Boston, right? So which is kind of the first actually working blood-based early stage ovarian cancer diagnostic. So diagnosed at stage one, ovarian cancer is, if you look at the Kaplan-Meier curves, right? So it's 95% survival rate within 5 years, which is good. Like it's almost curable, right? If it's diagnosed as it is diagnosed right now, which is like stage two going into stage three, the survival rate drops to like 20% or something, right? And that's your data, right? You need to diagnose early to prevent it not to die, right? So that's kind of the layer of common sense and kind of data driven, and this is true for a lot of cancers, and I think we're pretty equipped with data now to see that, if you screen for colorectal, if you early screen for lung, if you early screen for breast cancer, then your chances of survival are magnitudes higher, right? And then there is this higher order question that Artem touched upon, and that is kind of healthcare versus sick care. So what you need to understand is that the healthcare systems around the globe, it's not only US really, it's also in Europe, are sick care systems. And the reason why is that because they're protocol based, the way they think is that they basically get the patient who is already sick with something, and then there is a protocol to tackle this, and kind of a decision tree of, you're a doctor, I mean, you know this stuff, right? Like you have something, and then you do A and you do B, and if it's A, then you kind of progress along the protocol. And for real healthcare, which is preventative, which is personalized, which is kind of thinking ahead by a mile what will happen to the patient, which hasn't happened yet, this kind of requires the whole overhaul of the logic of how healthcare system thinks in general. So again, we're kind of getting into a bit of a philosophic discussion of whether this is possible at all. So I'd stick to data-driven population screening and prevention campaigns, which we kind of know how to execute already, and we try, and maybe not try to change the whole healthcare system from the get-go. It's not possible.
Maybe this relates to that prevention focus and data-driven side of things, but what would you say are some of the most common misconceptions about longevity and anti-aging, and how can we promote a more balanced, realistic understanding of the field?
I think there are a ton of misconceptions about the field, and I think a lot of people simplify the longevity space quite a lot. And by simplify, I mean they immediately kind of build the analogy of supplements, and sometimes maybe these kind of snake oil like treatments or cosmetics or something that essentially tackles aging on a visual level, right? Versus thinking about cellular rejuvenation, versus thinking about kind of the biological age versus the chronological age, or thinking about disease modifying treatments, etc. So that's the first part. And then the second part that immediately comes to my mind is kind of, I think, one of the misconceptions which the longevity field itself actually produced, believe it or not. And that is, I think, a lack of uniformity in the longevity field per se of what is the end goal, where you kind of have these two camps, where one camp says, and I think we belong to that one as a VC, let's find disease-modifying treatments to age-related diseases. And this is how we understand the underlying mechanisms, and this is how we sum them up together and understand aging. Right. And then the other camp is, well, leave the age-related diseases to quote unquote traditional biotech. We don't care about those. Let's defeat aging straight away as a process, right? As a holistic something that is systemic, something that is happening to the body. And I think that also creates a lot of confusion, especially not in us because we kind of live in it every day, but in people that try to look at the space from the outside. It's like defeating death, right? With this a very visionary yet very unactionable statement, versus actually tackling diseases in a certain way. So that's
You covered it pretty well, honestly. I'm like, what do I have to add? I would add value to that. No, the debate between is aging a disease or an aging a process is a similar tie into is HealthSpan versus lifespan. Inherently, if it's a disease has a cure, so you can develop a cure for aging. I've heard a few startup pitches recently that are saying that they're developing a vaccine for aging, for example. And can that be done? What is aging as a definition? Is it a process or is it an inherent state of something you can intervene and completely reverse? If it's a process, it's a multi-organ, multi-system thing that happens over the course of many, many, many years. So will your will your vaccine do anything? That's the high order question, and I'm not entirely sure that it will, but we are in the making bets business. So we'll see how those startups pan out and how they tackle aging as a process that can inherently be reversed with one shot.
You got me thinking now, maybe we're just barking up the wrong tree in terms of longevity and anti-aging. We got to start thinking about getting our Neuralink implants so that we can upload our sentient brain to a Amazon Web Services cloud for eternity and just live in perpetuity, and the meat and the bones are now obsolete.
I mean, people are working on that, right? Like, those are the biohacker community. There's a small chunk of them that is working on that. It is exciting to see that there's been so much progress in brain-machine interfaces. Think of Neuralink and the ability to use thoughts by just looking at a screen, not moving your eyes, not moving anything, and being able to generate text, being able to communicate by just having your thoughts be recorded. So there's something to say about translating neuronal signals to things of interaction, right? In words or messages, whatever you want to think about in that capacity. So maybe, I don't know, what would that look like? I don't know. To be honest, it could be very well be something that is 4 generations away from after I die that happens. But at least right now, I can't feasibly see a path to getting there in this, like in my generation. But it's an interesting idea.
You never know.
And concept. Exactly.
What are the most exciting developments you guys are following currently, and what are the potential impacts on longevity for the average person?
Should we talk about AI then, since that's kind of the this aspect of the most exciting things that everyone's talking about. So for those listening, I think for your audience, we've seen a lot of AI plus healthcare and fill in the space for healthcare into whatever indication you want to go after. So on the deals side, there's a lot of companies that are starting to tackle, okay, there's a lot of data being generated in the healthcare space. We need to process that data faster. How can we go about doing that by having a more robust system? The second vertical would be personalized medicine. This concept that we talked about earlier about preventative care. Well, that's kind of tying into personalized treatments. If you prevent or scan someone doing a full body MRI, you're customizing a treatment plan and protocol specifically for that person, depending on what's happening with their data profile. But then you're also adding that data into a system that can then help by becoming more and more better, improved efficacy for being able to detect things because it has more data to begin with. So I think there's a lot of excitement that we're seeing on the ground in terms of people thinking of novel solutions with less resources. There's people working, for example, on protein engineering and getting better protein engineering developed through in silico models. And that's important because a lot of the ways in which our drugs interact with our body is through the proteins, and targeting proteins allows for you to have better drugs that are more effective at delivering whatever payload they have without as high of a dose essentially. And you can use a lot of compute models to be able to get better binding site specificity to either on the drug, on the surface of the protein. And so that is another very interesting, exciting space. So I think a lot of the data components that are circulating on just a lot of companies generating data, and then the ability to now have more personalized therapy by doing things like preventative care, diagnostics, and other treatment modalities. Now, for those who are worried around AI replacement, that's not going to be something that I would worry as a healthcare professional. In fact, if you are a healthcare professional and you do have the ability to integrate tooling into your workflow, you will be a 10x better doctor because you're able to take away a lot of the alarm fatigue. Physicians have a lot of burnout because of alarm fatigue, because of notes, because of the fact that you have to transcribe things. There's a lot of regulatory compliance you have to follow. There's a lot of things that tie in that can be automated. And so the embracement of the automation of that will allow for you to actually do what you actually want to do, which is treat patients and have interactions with patients and do the people work rather than the paperwork. So hopefully for folks who are wondering about that, I wouldn't worry too much about that. I would also encourage folks to take an intro to AI class to really understand to demystify what AI is, so that way people can have a better understanding and not freak out as much, because it's not as smart as certain people make it seem like. So, and it's the capabilities of it being a human are not there yet. The reasoning component, the ability to just be a super intelligence, the Terminator style AI, we're nowhere close to that.
It is definitely like becoming much more prevalent lately. Like within the next 10 years maybe, could see most doctors walking into the exam room wearing an Apple Vision Pro and the augmented reality setup, and it's like transcribing your notes and prompting you with like questions and the patient's background. And it's definitely becoming more and more common in the workflow and the tooling, for sure. I'm pretty excited for that space specifically.
Exactly. And so if you're a doctor, isn't that going to be a lot easier for you to do your job? What's the number one thing, Jordan? What's the number one or two things that you're the least excited about when interacting with patients?
The least excited thing, yeah, I feel like you have an idea in mind. I would say that they always cannot afford the treatments that are proposed. Eating vegetables, exercising more. It's any of this like personalized medicine and doing the genetic analysis, like just the access to the care, I'd say, is the thing that is the most defeating in medicine for me. But in general, the workflow, like that's like the hottest topic right now in healthcare, is just everybody's burnt out. The admin burden, the clinical operations side of things are just such a drag. So that I would say gets the most media attention right now.
Yeah. And what I will tell you on the personalized genetic counseling, genetic care work, I know there's now a renewed effort to make that more accessible and more affordable and reduce the barrier to entry by allowing for, well, the cost of sequencing is going down significantly. And when protein sequencing goes online, which we have a company invested in that space, Glyphic Bio, I think that will even further push the cost down and allow for accessibility. But then also AI tooling for things like genetic counseling. You were able to have folks maybe interact with the chatbot and ask it questions about certain genetic risk profiles and certain areas of concern, and integrating a bunch of data to be able to get that information to patients. So I'm excited. I think there's opportunities that could tie into a lot of what doctors deal with and nurses and providers have to deal with, both in the admin side as well as the access side, especially because that is sometimes a rate limiting step for a lot of people.
Attracting top healthcare talent is crucial for providing exceptional patient care, but connecting with the right professionals can be time-consuming and complex. Cherry Health bridges the gap. Our network allows you to showcase your organization, post jobs with precision and ease, and directly engage with healthcare providers actively searching for roles like yours. Whether you're an ambitious do-it-yourselfer or a seasoned recruiter, our intuitive web platform makes it easy to showcase your open roles and organize your applicants. Need a more personalized approach? Cherry Health Staffing Solutions offers dedicated recruiters to find and vet the perfect candidates for your specific needs. Build your dream team with Cherry Health. Visit www.cherry.health and start growing your team today.
Where are you guys the most excited in terms of the venture capital back end of the longevity space? Where do you think the most money is to be made going forwards, just as we develop more things and they become more accessible?
My subscription to a crystal ball has recently ended, so the answer is I do not know where the most money is about to be made, right? But I think what we all share is the excitement around several areas. As a longevity investor, we're I think excited about is a lot of fundamental longevity tech is actually finally finding its footing in terms of being able to define specific clinical programs and actual targets and endpoints to measure during clinical trials to prove its worth. So beforehand, we had a bit of an identity crisis in the longevity space, where you had these fundamental technologies such as epigenetic reprogramming, senescent cell clearance, which have been around for a while, but then they did not really transform into clinical programs. They were not able to speak the regulator, the FDA language, right? Because there was no target. It was kind of stuck at the level of being exciting science of us claiming that it certainly affects something in aging or these age-related diseases we're talking about, right? So it has some effect, but we were not really able to measure what sort of effect or even hypothesize what sort of effect we would be trying to observe. And I think we are seeing a lot of this stuff finally kind of resolving, where you have companies in epigenetic reprogramming, such as Turn Bio, for example, with preclinical kind of going into clinical programs already. You have companies like Rubido in the senescent cell space, where they finally figured out that, you know, there are different types of senescent cells. There are different types that are associated with different diseases. So you go after a specific type, and this is how you end up with a clinical program, and this is how you end up with pharma partnerships around certain indications. So I think one of the biggest barriers, that identity crisis, that holisticness of the field, is finally getting tackled. And this is where, again, I cannot claim a lot of money will be made there, but a lot of this tech will be finally proven in humans with a specific endpoint in mind. So that's also great. Yeah, that will be my immediate take, to be completely honest with you. So nothing, and then you have, of course, a batch of technologies that are sci-fi and that are just emerging. We're seeing a lot of interest or a lot of kind of newcomers in the field of cryonics, all sorts of tissue regeneration, all the way up to head transplants, and kind of growing a spare body, right, for a human. So is it viable? No, it's not. Is it going to be viable in the next 10 years? Well, you can kind of argue about it. Most probably not totally, right? But it's kind of getting there on that level as well. Is it a good material for super early stage investing? If your holding period is long enough and you are like 20 years into the future type of guy, yes, it is. Again, maybe not exactly applicable for an average venture capitalist with a holding period of 5 to 6 years. That's that.
I guess, should I skimp out and save a bit of money by just cryogenically freezing my head and forgetting about the rest of the body?
That we don't know.
I mean, if you want to.
If you want to,
If you want
that's
to,
the
I'm not
point
going
of
to
it.
stop you. Go for it. Go for it, man.
Going back to it, sorry. In terms of like the actual research and making money on the longevity field, just given the time scale over which obviously the data evolves, right? Like we have enough trouble doing longitudinal studies on people that go for 3 years, 5 years. There's just so much drop off and people fall off and disappear. Like when it comes to longevity, like, okay, we're talking now 80, 90, 100-year studies. How do we actually balance the need for innovation and speed with that of, you know, data and research and even the ethical considerations?
Well, I think you boil it down to specific processes that you want to observe, right? It's extremely hard. I think it's borderline impossible actually to design a pure life extension trial, because then you would obviously, by common standards, you would need to observe someone for the whole lifetime and then kind of preserve the pretty much the sameness of all the factors that are influencing these people, and the people need to be kind of similar. I mean, it's a rabbit hole, right? So you try to break aging down into separable processes, and this is how you try to measure it in a clinical time frame, a clinical framework, apparently, or a clinical trial framework, and then extrapolate of at, you know, kind of the longer health span, I guess. But that's where I sit. I'm very pragmatic about it. Artem, sorry, you were
As a
starting
fund,
to.
yeah, as a fund, I think we're pretty pragmatic around. It comes back to the definition of health span or lifespan and the importance and which ones you want to tackle. So if we're focusing on improving the health span of an individual, inherently as you get older, certain things start to break down. Your heart starts to have issues, potentially dementia, Alzheimer's, osteoarthritis. Those are all age-related or age-associated diseases. As you get older and more time progresses on this earth, you start having issues, right? Or things that start not working as well. And so in building off what Sergey was saying, the idea around how can we improve your overall quality? Well, maybe we need a better therapy for a cancer treatment, or maybe a better therapy for cardiovascular disease, or you name your current condition in which there's a lot of area in study. That's all longevity focused, because we're trying to remove things that, or reduce the things that happen as you get older. And so as a fund, we really try to zone in on those areas in which we can have actionable actionable investments that also tackle things that are age associated.
And then Jordan, look, I mean, I hate to talk about these things usually because they really feel very trivial and kind of kindergarten type of level, right? But at some point, we also arrive at the notion that, it is quote unquote the responsibility of a drowning person to save himself. And that is, we can't talk about, treating cancer and doing whatever, freezing heads for hours. But then realistically, if you do not convey a very simple thought on the populational level, that simple lifestyle interventions, this trivial kind of taking care of yourself component, which is, sleeping enough, not eating junk and exercising, right? Kind of get you very far in life. Really, when it comes to aging, when it comes to longevity. So whenever we're talking about prevention, we're talking about interventions, Brian Johnsons of the world, all of this makes sense in any shape or form only if you build it on these very simple things at the lifestyle level that are happening. And if they are not happening, you can innovate in biotech as much as you wish. You will not be able to really mold anything out of a specific individual if the individual doesn't care about himself on a very basic level to begin with. It's the sad truth. People always want to hear that there's going to be a longevity drug where you consume a pill and you become perfectly healthy and younger and prettier and more muscular and whatever. But it just doesn't work like that, and it never will,
You got
most
to do the
probably.
work.
You got to do the work.
You got to
You
do
got to
the
do the
work.
work.
Yeah,
You got to commit. This is the issue. So the whole
you
biotech
got to
industry
show up.
doesn't really help you at all if you don't commit on the personal level and on the lifestyle level. And these are not, space tech like interventions. They're pretty basic.
It's very
Exactly.
true. Just the role of personal responsibility in longevity. Somebody mentioned it earlier, but the system is very much set up for sick care, not health care. And so there's not a ton of focus around just prevention, and you don't need $1 million biologic DNA sequencing MRI setup protocol. Just stop going to Burger King twice a day, and you got 90 steps today total distance. We got to work on that a little bit, right? So it hasn't been a focus of the system, unfortunately.
There we go. Just
And
do that, and that person probably can live way longer.
yeah, and you know why we are having that big of a trouble with this, because we don't have proper role models for people to follow. I mean, so for some reason, okay, so we are living in the world of the trackers and fitness influencers and whatever, and that actually helps because it kind of raises self-awareness at some point, and at least gets people thinking about being healthier and caring for themselves. But realistically, I think we still have some way to go in understanding how to. I mean, it is a bad term, but inspire people in mass way to actually do these things and educate people as well. Because think about it that way. Um, everyone knows cancer is bad for you, right? I mean, I'm simplifying it to the biggest possible extent. Like, you can die from cancer. Why are population screening campaigns showing a horrendously low return rate? Like biggest issue with population screening campaigns, ovarian cancer, breast cancer is the prime example of it. Like with breast cancer, every European country, for example, is pretty much has a state mandated, state paid breast cancer prevention. Once a year, every woman exceeding, I think, 45 or 50 years old, ballpark, would get a letter which says, here's your essentially ticket for a free sonography, right? Go check. It's important. The return rate is less than 40%, sometimes it's 20%. Well, everyone knows cancer is bad for you. The problem is we're very bad at explaining people in simple terms why this should be done and why it relates to them, actually, personally, right? And I think we still have a long way. I mean, we're talking about these things as they are obvious, but they're really not obvious when you kind of try to extrapolate it at the size of the population, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think just focusing on those things where there is a strong potential for early intervention, that's really where the screening programs shine.
But yet again, It's kind of obvious that, you invite people, you pre-screen, you tackle it early, but then people don't come, right? And then the question is, and you've sent the letters. Well, maybe your way of inviting them is wrong, right? Maybe you are doing a bad job educating them. That's also part of the story. Look, it's really complicated. We have a company in the portfolio actually that built a couple of digital tools to increase the conversion rate in these pre-screening campaigns. And it turned out that, for example, going fully digital and providing people with personalized risk scores and providing them with digestible
Cool.
interfaces and user experiences actually boosts the conversion rate. Now people are actually interested, right? So there you go. You just need
Yeah,
to
I guess make it
work on it.
more engaging, make it more easily accessible in terms of the reminders. Because right now, yeah, you get a letter in the mail for your prostate screening time, and
Yeah,
or
no
your
one cares.
your annual check-in with the family doctor. They're supposed to be bringing this up, but it's very easy to miss these critical things.
Or a dog eats
I
it.
love that you guys have an app. Yeah, or the dog eats it. I guess on that same topic, maybe before we wrap up here, what advice would you give to clinical providers wanting to give their patients the latest cutting edge in developments in the longevity space, bound by those rigorous standards on evidence and research? Like, where would we direct our patients, or what would you even tell them?
You stay bound to rigorous evidence-based stuff. As mentioned, there's things in the longevity ecosystem that the people shouldn't try, right? The stem cell therapies that Sergey mentioned earlier, and things that may not have full evidence, and you don't necessarily have a team of experts on the ready to go just to intervene or anything like that. So I think for physicians, if they're bound by evidence-based work, they should continue to work in that space, but I encourage people to take more self-responsibility or action to do preventative check-ins. So just kind of zoning in on that. But I would definitely say that for me, when I go to my doctor, I assume that when I ask them about something, they're getting the most up-to-date information about a specific topic that they are able to validate for me. So when I bring up questions about, oh, have you heard of this study, or what do you think about this process or this protocol, the response I typically get is, I haven't read enough papers of enough data to confirm that that's a real effect. And so I can't advise you on whether or not that should be taken. And I think that is a reasonable approach, because there's things change super quickly. Someone does one study, then another study comes out, then another study comes out, but it's someone's health, and we want to make sure we preserve and protect that.
My take would be so as an HCP, well, embrace longevity, data-backed longevity medicine, right? So there is the whole part now, which is called longevity medicine, which is based on preventative and personalized approaches. We actually helped create it's a Swiss-based, the biggest society. So yes, an association of longevity physicians, which is called Healthy Longevity Medicine Society, HLMS. They do have their certain protocols and certain interventions actually certified, for example, with NHS in the UK. So right now, it's the biggest official, the most credible kind of society of longevity physicians that are working with data-backed approaches, right? Where the focus is exactly on preventative, on personalized to a certain degree. So if you are an HCP, you have a ton of educational resource that is available out there without, as Artem mentioned, kind of diving deep into these snake oil type of treatments. Yeah, embrace longevity medicine kind of as a framework of thought in a way, and you will naturally segue into prevention versus sick care. There is no other way.
And I guess for anybody listening who's not currently following David Goggins on Instagram, go get on that one. The prevention, the discipline, the day-to-day routine stuff.
Yeah, but you should not
Very
look. I
cool.
mean, when it comes to Goggins, please do not wake up 3 a.m. in the morning and decide that you're running 3 ultra marathons in a single go. Like it's not a good idea. By all means, you just don't do it. But stick to basic recommendations that the guy has, not exactly replicate what he does.
I'll have to check that one out though. HLMS, you said, in the
HLMS,
NHS in
yeah.
the UK. Okay,
So
amazing.
HLMS stands for Healthy Longevity Medicine Society. They're Swiss-based. The organization is in Switzerland, and they have certain stuff already certified with And also implemented, by the way, in major hospitals from Shanghai into Israel into Sheba, I think all the way down to Mayo Clinic now. So they're pretty big.
I guess then for anybody wanting to get in touch with you guys, is there a website or contact you wanted to throw out there before we finish up here?
I think we're
Find
pretty
us on
active on
LinkedIn.
LinkedIn. Yeah, LinkedIn.
Yeah,
Yeah,
LinkedIn.
LinkedIn is good.
That would work.
That's the
And then our
spot.
website, our website, LongeVC.com. Also, there's a contact us form if anyone has any direct questions. They can ping us there as well.
Amazing. Well, thank you guys so much for taking the time this morning, this afternoon, and this evening. I think we're in 3 different time zones and different continents here, but I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jordan.
Thanks for having us.